All right, we're going to look at this transfer project. Just to recap, we have two rosters and they have name, grade, and we want to move somebody from one to the other. So that involves copying the name, copying the grade, and then deleting them from the first one. That on its own is not too bad. I'll show you very quickly. But then we have to check a few errors or edge cases. For example, if you ask who you want to move and then the user types a name that's not in here, if they say Luigi and we say there's no Luigi, you want to handle that instead of crashing. Or what if they bring over somebody who's already got a name twin in the second group? So if we say I want to move over Josh, well, there's already a Josh and we don't want to delete this guy even though there's someone with the same name. So how might we do that? Well, in order to add someone, we can say pretty simply we give them a key and a value. In our dictionary definition, that's what these are called, key and value. But in our meaningful description of the class, this is name and grade, so we'll call them name and grade when we do the variables. But first, let's show this stuff to give us proof that it's working. And we'll do a prettier version later, but let's just do first and second with the blank in between. So this has added Luigi onto the end, and that's what we want. Dictionaries are not in order. I mean, theoretically they are, but they're not going to alphabetize or anything. So in order to generalize this and say if we're going to add a name and a grade, well, we have a name and a grade, and they're going to equal something. So we're going to ask the user, we're going to say input, enter a student to transfer, and we'll assume that they do it right. Later we'll add checks for if they don't. And then grade, we want to get them out of first period dot get name. Except this is missing one part, because if we do this, it would take this guy and add him here, but we want to remove him from here. So instead of get, we're going to use pop, which does the same thing, but also cuts him out. It's like cut instead of copy, you know? So now when we run it, we took him out and added him over here. And that's exactly what we want to do. However, we have those issues I mentioned. What if they put a name we don't have? Well, it says error, and we don't want that. We'd rather say, hey, try again, or something. Or what if they put a name that was in both, and now we took Eric out of here, but we destroyed the Eric that was already in period 2 instead of having both in harmony. So let's deal with those. The first one is super easy. We can say the same little while loop that we've done for other inputs. You say, while it's not what we want, ask again. Okay. While name not in first period, do this. And whenever you copy paste, that's usually a sign that there is a better way. And there is a better way. But this is fine for now with only using simple things we've seen. So let's say no one by that name in first period. And later we'll make it so that it can go from second to first or fifth to fourth or whatever. But we'll start going from first to second. And now let's try that to make sure we didn't mess anything up. Try it once with a good one, and then once with a bad one, and that works. Great. So now we got to think about, what if they say a name that we already have in here, and we don't want to crush it when we move over? So let's say we're going to use the in keyword again but probably just if instead of while. And we're going to say if name in second period, then we do some stuff. And hopefully we can still finish up with all this, and we don't have to like duplicate any lines or anything. We'll see what happens. If name in second period, let's do a last initial. So we can say, well, there's Josh Q and Josh F or something. So let's say and then we'll say name plus equals last initial, maybe a little space in there, and maybe a little dot. We'll do some better, prettier format later. But this is going to work if they put in a Josh. I know this is not perfect, but let's say they put in a Josh, and then there's already, so let's say there's a Josh T. Uh-oh. This is going to say we can't do this anymore because we loved to change name and then use it in here to create the new guy, but it's too late for this line if we try to extract their grade. And I don't want to duplicate it. I don't want to have like this stuff happen in one branch and then happen again in another branch, because then we worry about what if we change them, how can we keep track. Ideally, we would make something like this into a function, and then we could call that function in a few different spots, and then if we have to change how it works, we just change the def of the function. But for now, to make it quick, let's just see what happens if we just do this before that. I think that's all we need to get it going again. Let's try a normal one to make sure we didn't mess it up, and that's fine. And then a one that's not in there, and then a one that is. So now we have the Josh and the Josh T. Okay, they both have different grades, and this guy is the one who brought it over from the first one, I think. Let me make sure. Yeah, Josh had the 56. Okay, so this isn't that long, it isn't that crazy. We did have to rearrange this part, which is a little strange to have like this happen and this happen not next to each other because they're so related. So ideally I would like to change that, but this is very nice and short and crisp, doing the job. If I were going to continue and say I want to make it look a little prettier, I want to do things like make sure they actually do enter an initial and have a little while where it's like ask again if they put a whole last name or a number or something. Or if I want to do this part where I can have multiple classes go in multiple directions, then I would take some stuff and put it into functions, like adding somebody to a class, adding somebody to a roster. That's kind of the core that would happen in any of these if you're transferring one to another, if you're transferring a person that's already got a name, if you're transferring a person who wasn't there at all. They all end up with, okay, adding a person in a grade. So maybe that could be a function, and that could get called at the end of a few different branches, you know. Then it would just be preparing to get to that function, like preparing the parameters and making sure they're clean inputs, you know. So something like this would be nice, and then we can decide to make it look prettier at the end when we print them. Instead of just a blob like this, it would go in 2 nice columns or something. And so you could use a for loop, or you could try a few other things to print them and make them look nice. But that's the general idea of checking if something's in there, using a little bit of loops and ifs and whiles, and then building on that base to go to the fancy stuff later. There we go.